Hello and welcome back to the Solo RolePlayers Podcast. Today on the show, I am thrilled to bring another of the fantastic solo role-playing audio content creators and one whom we have been trying to organize this interview for an incredibly long time, Steve Morrison from Errant Adventures. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure. And as I just said, you were actually one of the first people that I reached out to interview at the very beginning of this show. And since then, we have been struggling to find a time to work because of time zones and busyness and general life schedule. And I'm so pleased that we could finally make it happen.
Me too. I promise I wasn't ignoring your emails for all of that amount of time.
I know, it was one of those situations. A spot would come up and it'd say, "Hey, how about Saturday?" And then I'd forget about it again until Sunday and then think, "Oh man, Anyway, it is what it is. We're here now, and that is what is important. Now, you came onto my radar just after I started recording audio for solo role-playing stuff. And when I started, as I've talked about on the show before, one of the reasons I did was because I wasn't finding out there, I was finding a lot of narrative stuff out there in the solo role-playing audio. But what I wanted to hear was people's thought process about how they were doing this stuff, and that's why I started in recording in my style and playing in my style of what I'm doing, the way that I'm doing it. And shortly after that, I discovered the Errant Adventures, and I was just around the time I discovered Starforged as well. And I'm kind of glad I didn't find you until after I started, because otherwise I might not have started, because your style was exactly what I was looking for in having enough of that narrative element and feeling the story come together, but also hearing the player's decision process and how you were actually coming up with stuff. Now, we are going to get into Errant Adventures and how all that came about. But before that, surely there is a bit of a story about how you got into RPGs in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm glad that you didn't discover me until after you started, because then the world would be lacking an amazing storyteller.
Oh, thank you.
And we would all be worse for it. So it was meant to not be.
Meant to not be.
Yeah.
The famous expression.
Exactly. So as far as getting started in RPGs, I came to it in college, and it was a funny situation in that, junior, senior of high school, I had no idea about RPGs or anything other than I had discovered Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind on the computer. And
it was Daggerfall for me.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And so just devoting myself to it, but not realizing that was a style of games that could be played offline until I got to college. And I kind of presented myself as a huge Tolkien fan who, knew every single Tolkien book that had ever been published. And I was in the common room of my dorm one day, and I look over and I see a guy reading a Lord of the Rings book that I did not recognize. And I was like, what madness is this? Surely there cannot be a book that I don't know about. So I walked over and was like, "Hey, what is this book?" And he's like, "Oh, it's the Lord of the Rings role-playing game." And I'm like, "I don't know what that means." And he's like, "Oh, well, you create a character and you can play in Middle-earth." And I said, "Okay, when do we start?"
Yeah. Which Lord of the Rings role-playing game is this? What decade are we talking?
So this is 2005.
Okay.
So it's the Decipher Lord of the Rings role-playing game. I think I've got the book packed away right now, but I do still have the original book because basically, as soon as we finished talking, I went out and bought it, and then we started playing a week later and played for a few months. And then we moved over to D&D 3.5. And then from there, we played a long, year and a half long campaign. We were in college. So basically, our campaigns were throughout the course of the year.
Sure.
So, but we played a long game of Star Wars, the D20 Star Wars. And that was kind of the first character that I really got into. The other characters before that were fun, but like it hadn't quite clicked yet in my brain. And that was the first character that like I created a fleshed out backstory and had a lot more motivation for, and it spawned another campaign after it where we played the like children of our characters, and so it kind of expanding the lore of like the family as it goes through the rebellion, and then into the New Republic and all this stuff. And of course at the time I was also reading all of the EU books, and just like I was deep in Star Wars. So it was like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings were my two passions at that time. And being able to start by playing this Lord of the Rings game and then also playing this really long campaign in the Star Wars RPG, I mean, it just really like kickstarted my love for the hobby. And then from there, we did like D&D 4e and a whole bunch of, Vampire the Masquerade, and just played all sorts of stuff.
But predominantly a player in the early days, as opposed to a GM.
Yep. So I definitely was mostly a player. I think I ran a like 3-session Lord of the Rings RPG kind of mini campaign to give our game master a break. But yeah, mostly was a player.
Did you have any inherent interest in having more control over the story creation, or were you happy to be the character and just experience the world through them as you went?
I was really more just happy to be a player and happy to explore a character. And I think part of that stems from, so I started writing fiction when I was really, really young. So I was homeschooled, and I did a vocabulary course where every week I would have a different list of vocabulary words that I had to learn. And my mom was like, well, you need to write an essay every week using those words, and that's kind of, how I'll know that you've kind of internalized them. And I was like, oh, I don't want to write an essay every week. I was like, can I write a story instead? And, she thought about it for a minute, and then she's like, yeah, I think that's okay. And I mean, talk about a life-changing decision. Because I was probably 12.
Yeah.
And, suddenly every week during the school year, I was writing a 500 to 1,000 word, little short story. And of course I was like, well, what am I going to write about? Well, I'm going to write about my favorite things. So I had a Lord of the Rings kind of OC that, I was writing about. I had a Star Wars OC that I was writing about. And then I was really, really into the Greek epics, and the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid. And so I also had a kind of ancient Greek OC, and I would just kind of rotate between these different universes to tell these stories using these vocabulary words. And that's where it like really kickstarted for me.
That's awesome.
So I think I was already getting that kind of satisfaction of having quote unquote control over the story.
But you kept writing then as you went through to college and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Weekly.
I was probably not as rigorously, but I definitely still was writing quite a lot at that time.
Fantastic.
And I think that was where like playing RPGs was a different experience than writing fiction. Mm-hmm. And so it felt kind of like, I don't know, it felt like two very different things. And so when I started playing RPGs, I was like, well, yeah, I play this character, and it's a lot of fun. I'm just kind of I get to inhabit this character. I also, because I was homeschooled, never had an opportunity to do theater or anything like that. And so I think there was a little bit of an opportunity for me to delve into some of those things that I probably would have really enjoyed doing in high school, but never really got a chance to. And so I was like, I can inhabit this character. I can try to put myself into the shoes of someone else and explore an arc, a story from there.
Yeah. You said something that struck me earlier. You said that when you got into the Star Wars campaign, then it was the first time something really clicked about your character. And I know exactly, I think everyone who tries RPGs and gets into it has that experience. Because playing video games, your character is so much more of a mechanical thing, at least I find in my experience. Like, yeah, you care about the story maybe or whatever, but it's sort of stats and it's, upgrades and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that connectedness is usually not there. I mean, some games sort of stand out, video games stand out. Yeah. I don't think I had a question about that. It just struck me that that is one of those magical things about
it is
about role.
And I think about that too of like, I love playing, Mass Effect, or like I'm playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 right now.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff like that. And those are games that encourage you to role play, but also there are limitations on that because there are pre-written responses and there are kind of pre-planned paths that you can go down in those games. Whereas if you're sitting at the table with a group of players, you have no idea what's going to happen. And I have had instances where, we have these moments that are incredibly like full of emotion and depth. And it has been some of the best experiences of my life. And then there are other times where, somebody says a goofy joke offhand and you just spend the next 20 minutes laughing. And all of the tension and like seriousness of what's happening just completely diffuses. And you never know which it's going to be. But it's like you have a totally different method of interacting with a story when you're playing around a table with other human beings than if you're playing a computer game.
Yeah. And secondarily to that, then somewhere in the middle is playing RPGs solo. And
right.
So there is less of that uncertainty of, is all the tension going to be sucked out of the room because someone makes a silly joke, which actually kind of bothered me when playing in groups, especially if that's not what my character wanted to do or what I was in the mood for,
Yeah.
How did you transition then? Or, I mean, not necessarily transition, but how did you discover and start getting into the solo side of things, and why?
Yeah. It's a great question. Like a lot of people, I encountered Ironsworn in 2019, and
pre-COVID even.
Pre-COVID,
Wow.
and it was a very weird experience because I heard about it, I was reading about it, and I'm like, playing RPG solo, like what kind of loser would do that?
Yeah.
Like it's awful. But of course, I was intrigued, and I'm like, well, I mean, I like playing all sorts of different RPGs. I am definitely one of those people that, I am always looking for the new shiny when it comes to RPGs.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. Well, we're not all,
No.
in fact, because I play with some people who humor me when I come to the table and say, hey, we're going to try out this game. But it always comes back to, D&D. So I found Ironsworn and I was really intrigued by it. And I sat down, created a character, started playing. And I started by just journaling it. And after like 3 or 4 sessions, a couple things happened. One, I was way too hard on myself, which I feel like is a time-honored tradition when you learn Ironsworn, that you're like, well, I'm the game master of this solo game, so I have to make these characters suffer.
Yes.
And because it's my character and I don't want to be perceived as cheating and going easy on my character, I need to make this as hard as possible. And then it just kind of snowballs from there and is not necessarily very fun when your character dies like 3 sessions in. So that was one thing that happened. The other thing that happened is because I was sitting there journaling it, I was getting frustrated because I was like, I am writing a story, but instead of writing a story like I normally do, where I start writing and I get into a flow state and I just kind of keep writing until I get to the end of the story, I keep having to stop to engage the mechanics of this game. And it is starting to kind of piss me off because I'm feeling like I'm not getting that same sense of satisfaction from the writing side of things. And also because I have to kind of pause playing the game to write out some description and dialogue and all these other things, that I'm not getting that sort of fast-paced response from the game. And it's really just kind of a shadow of both of those experiences.
Yeah. So worst of both worlds as opposed to...
Exactly. So I stopped because I was like, well, this is not fun. Like, if I want to write a novel, I'll just go write a novel. I don't need a game to get in the way of telling me, what happens when conflict, because I arrogantly perhaps feel like I have a highly developed sense of when to imbue drama and twists and turns into a narrative. And as anybody who has listened to my show will know, dice rolling for me is a very risky proposition because I have the worst dice luck in the world. So, oftentimes I would be like, well, okay, I got to come up with another complication. And I'm like, man, I just want to get to this place that I'm walking down this road, and it's taken me 4 sessions to walk down this road because I keep rolling up complications. Now, this was a moment where I was trying to play the game as written rather than saying, okay, this doesn't matter to me. I'm going to jump ahead to arrive at the destination and just get into whatever the story is. So that's kind of a lesson that I learned later on. But going back to kind of discovering solo role playing, I had this experience, I put it down, and I was like, cool, that was interesting. It was an experiment, but it's not for me. Then we got into COVID lockdowns, and around that same time, a couple of friends in our gaming group, we had purchased some podcast equipment to start recording a podcast together. And all of that equipment ended up at my house.
Nice. Well done.
But we were in lockdown. Yeah. So, it was like I was furloughed from my job at the time. And so I'm like sitting at home with nothing to do. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll try to figure out how to make this podcast equipment work. And it was at that point that I went back to Ironsworn and was like, okay, well, maybe the problem was that I was trying to write it down. So I'm going to try recording it instead. And I did a kind of hack of regular Ironsworn because Starforged, the playtest wasn't out yet. So this might have actually been before COVID, like late 2019, going into 2020. So I recorded a couple of sessions, and it was fun, but as often happens, because I didn't have any sort of deadlines or anything like that, I recorded 4 or 5 sessions, put them together, but didn't it was a lot of work. So I was like, well, I'm not going to focus on that right now. So jump forward into the Starforged playtest, and I'm looking around at all these people who are playing the game and posting their play reports in the Discord. And I'm like, well, that's cool, but I wonder if it would be beneficial for the creator, Sean, to have an audio recording of someone like reading the rules and reacting to them essentially live and going through the truth stuff and the character creation and all of that stuff in order to kind of get a sense of how someone might play it at the table live as opposed to reading somebody's like play report of it.
And as much as a educational thing as a narrative experience for you at that point then, or?
At that point, it was not at all intended to be a narrative experience for myself. It was literally just I want to play this, like I want to try this out, and I enjoyed the recordings that I did previously, but I also want to participate in the playtest. And I think that was the biggest thing for me is like, I want to participate in the playtest, but I already know that playing Ironsworn and writing it down doesn't really work for me. So I'm going to try doing this instead and see if this has any value. And I didn't have any expectation that it would have any value or go anywhere. Like I planned to record a couple of sessions and post them up there and be like, cool, like that I did the thing, moving on. But like at that same time, I was wanting to start this podcast with my friends, but because of lockdown, we were unable to get going on it. And as often happens, life changes. People kind of not necessarily even drift apart because we all are still part of the same gaming group, but like the moment that we were in when we decided to start a podcast died with COVID. And our lives changed, for the most parts for the better. But the people that we were who were going to create that podcast, when we eventually came back around in like 2021 to try and do it, our hearts weren't in it. And we were like, we just want to hang out, play games together as friends and like not make a job of this. And so by that point, I was like, I felt justified in having made the decision to continue making my own thing because I received this feedback from those initial postings saying like, hey, this is pretty good. Like maybe you should throw this up in a podcast feed and just keep going at it. And I was like, okay, I will. Yeah. And Errant Adventures was born.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's been on a bit of a journey as well. I'm still in the Starforged part of Errant Adventures. How long did you run with Starforged for?
So I'm in my 4th season, and season 1 and season 3 are both Starforged. And season 1 is 34 episodes.
Yeah, I'm still in season 1.
Yep, and season 3 is 20 episodes. And yeah, the show has changed a lot since then. But I have been on record as saying that I could play Starforged every day of my life for the rest of my life and be perfectly happy, and I stand by that. But I also am someone who likes to play different games, and so I've also tried to like branch out a little bit and try some other stuff. But I'm always constantly thinking about like, well, should I just go back to Starforged? Like that's pretty good. Like that's a pretty good game. I should just stick with that. It really like it fits with my needs and my wants.
So, I mean, now since you started, you've obviously explored out and tried other solo experiences and other games, and we'll come back to that. But what is it about Starforged that does it for you? What is it about those mechanics? Because it is quite different than or at least in my experience, all of the solo RPG experiences I've had are really different to Ironsworn and Starforged. So what is it about it?
I think it's a few things. I think there's enough mechanical levers and gigas to kind of play with for me, because I do like mechanics. I like numbers that go up and down and being able to spend resources in order to both mechanically but also narratively impact how things are going. And I think there's enough of that in Starforged while also not being so much that I feel like it's overwhelming and like there's so much to manage mechanically that it gets in the way of the storytelling. And I also think that the way that Sean has crafted the moves and the flow of Ironsworn, it is fairly uniquely set up to propel you from one situation to the next, from one narrative moment to the next. And like some of this is not unique to Ironsworn. I mean, it's the same with a lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse games where you roll and there's, you've got your miss, your weak hit, your strong hit, and there are little prompts for each of those of like, okay, you get everything that you desire with a strong hit, or, you succeed, but with a complication on a weak hit. But I think the way that Ironsworn, the way that those moves are written and the way that they interact with the oracles as well. And I think this is something that's really key because a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, they put that complication reaction onto the players, onto the storyteller, the game master, which is fine. But in Ironsworn, because it is a solo game, Sean has built all of these oracle tables that have all sorts of different prompts so that you don't have to go it alone.
Yeah.
And I think that combination,
and self-contained too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it's like you don't really need anything else but the oracles and the moves in Ironsworn. But they like feed into each other really, really well. Of like, okay, I've got a weak hit on this. There's a complication. I could just come up with what that most logical complication is based on the narrative. And sometimes that's the easiest and best way to do it. I could also turn around and say, well, I don't really know what the complication is here. So, or I want something that isn't as obvious as the first thing that jumps into my head. So I'm going to roll on the action and theme oracles to see what those say to try and trigger a thought process in my head. Or I'm just going to go straight to the story complication oracle because there's one of those. There's an oracle for everything. And I'm going to roll on that and see what happens, see what the complication is. And all the prompts are written broadly enough that for the most part, you can kind of apply them. And so at that point, they're just a brainstorming tool that is meant to help your mind create these connections in the narrative that you haven't seen yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And more than just a brainstorming tool as well, but that fact that it is all self-contained within the one book and therefore written to respond to those other elements that it knows you're going to be rolling because of, it knows you're going to be rolling because of a miss or, various sorts of things. And it does, I have found that element of it really easy and easier to do than when you pull oracles from other, like more generic oracles or that kind of things into your game.
Yeah.
You said, though, Sean has crafted through the moves a way that really encourages you to propel that narrative at those important points. But I would argue once you get the knack of it, right? And like you said initially when you were playing Ironsworn, you were finding, I can't get down this hallway, because you have to keep trying to fill in that. How did that click for you? And just go into a bit more depth of what it meant or how you can overcome that and not push back against those propelling points that are written into the system.
Yeah, I think it came, the realization came when I was trying to write a script about how to get into solo role playing. And most of that, was just sort of collecting conversations that I had seen on the internet, in podcasts and stuff like that, and then just sort of synthesizing all of that information, trying to make it as simple as possible for people who are interested in getting started in solo role playing. And I realized, and it's such a simple thing that it's going to be like, oh, well, that's obvious, but it's solo role playing, which means you or me or whoever is playing is the only person at the table, which means there is no need or there's no problem with just ignoring all the stuff that doesn't interest you as a player, because nobody is going to applaud you for slogging through something that you hate
just because you did it right.
Just because you did it right. Yeah. And it's like, and we see this all the time in fiction where, you'll have a book, a character is like, oh, I need to get from point A to point B. Now, some books, the story is about how they get from point A to point B. Other stories, they just show up at point B and then the story starts. And then like they can actually get into the detail. So a lot of it is like, what is the thing that most interests you? And don't be afraid to just skip over stuff if it's not interesting to you.
Yeah.
And I think in Ironsworn, the like expedition rules are a great example of this. And I love, like, the expeditions in Starforged are my favorite aspect of the game. I would just do expeditions left and right if I could. And I can, except I'm trying to create a show. So I am trying to build a like cohesive narrative. But you can do the expedition and say, okay, well, I'm gonna set a rank for this. I'm going to roll on my method of how I'm like traveling from waypoint to waypoint. I'm going to roll up waypoints. I'm going to explore those waypoints. I'm going to go deeper and deeper and kind of, really flesh out this journey. Or I can roll the set a course move, which is just one move that is like, you go from here to there. And if you get a strong hit, the situation there favors you. If you get a weak hit, like, you make it, but there's some sort of complication. And if it's a miss, then, either you get waylaid or, something like that, or it's a really bad situation when you arrive. Well, that's great. But as somebody who has terrible dice rolling luck, I know that if I pick up those dice, there is a very strong possibility that things are going to go off the rails. And to be clear, that is sometimes the fun of the game, is when things go off the rails. Like, this is why we play role-playing games rather than just tell stories where we decide what happens. But also, sometimes I'm more interested in what happens once I get to that planet and not what the situation is as I arrive, or like what kind of complications arise that I have to overcome in order to just make it to the planet. And so there was a time where I would not have made this decision, but now I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to roll anything. I'm just going to say I travel from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And now I can start rolling on things, because now I'm interested in what complications are going to arise now that I'm on this planet.
Yeah.
And I think it's a sliding scale for everybody. But one of my pieces of advice to people who are getting into solo role playing is only focus on the things that interest you, because that is really, ultimately, if you're playing by yourself, it is you are the audience. Yeah. You are the audience for your game. So play stuff that is interesting. And also, because you're the only audience, if you start to go down a path and you're like, man, this is becoming a slog and I really don't like the way that this is developing, and I just, my character made these decisions, but now I didn't like put these things together in the way that I thought would be really cool. Just retcon it. Like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, and actually I love that is built into the game as well, that there is a move built around reframing or refocusing something there. I think in general that is it's almost like a challenge that we all in this hobby have to get through ourselves only, or get past ourselves, which only happens through experience of it. For some reason, like, it seems so obvious. Yeah, dude, you're the only one there. Do whatever you want. But that's not easy.
No.
Initially, for some reason. You know, like, you feel like you're doing it wrong, or you're trying to, at least until you get a feel for which of those buttons and levers that you want to pull and which ones you can lean on more and all that sort of thing. Until you get a feel for that, it can be quite difficult. And giving yourself permission to do that is really important. For me, I think it was a realization when I started thinking about it as much narratively as game-y, and thinking about the kind of narratives that I'm reading or watching all the time, and some of those devices that they use, which are totally effective and okay, like 3 years later, or, you know, whatever, or there's just fade to black and then something else. And that's like, when you're reading that or watching that, you don't think, oh, well, they didn't play, go through the narrative and tell me what happened for breakfast this morning, because it wasn't important to the story or to the character.
Exactly.
You know? And that, I think that is the point that I realized, actually, this is totally natural, like a totally natural narrative thing to do.
Yeah.
Is to jump to the important bits. And in this case, the important bits to you, because you are the audience.
Exactly. Because as a writer, like, one of the things that you learn is, like, if you're bored by your writing, anybody that's reading it is going to be bored by your writing.
Good advice.
So either like, figure out a way to make that scene more interesting, or cut it.
Yeah.
And move on to the next thing.
The other thing that, just speaking of advice for people trying to get into Ironsworn or Starforged, we had recently over at the Patreon, we do a monthly book club there, and our first book club was Starforged,
Nice.
where we all got together and we played the game over the course of a month, and then met up and talked about our experiences. And then following that, like, a lot of us had similar experiences and similar challenges in starting out. I was a bit further ahead than most of the people there, because I had been playing it for the show. I'd done 6 or 7 sessions or something, and most of the participants had done maybe between 1 and 4. And we did come across common challenges that we faced in just getting that knack with Starforged. And I constantly felt, even when I had bad experiences with it, I constantly felt, I know this is something that is in there, and I'm just not quite, like, I'm just missing something. It's me. It's not this system.
Yeah.
And then after that book club, we had, I got in touch with Sean, and he came in to the Discord for our Celebrity Lounge there and spent 24 hours just answering everyone's questions about Starforged, which was really awesome.
That's awesome.
I'm going to collate all the answers and put it up and do a post of it in the next week. Great session, and so eye-opening hearing from him about some of the advice that he had.
Yeah.
And, like, it is stuff that's in the book, but so often when you're reading books, you don't know what's important necessarily when you're starting out. And for me, I kind of felt like I really need to fill these tracks before I try and resolve them, you know? And if I'm not filling it, it's a huge risk. And Sean said flat out in the chat, he said 6 boxes is, like, that's about the sweet spot.
Yep.
For doing it. And I'm like, wow, I never considered that, but that is so freeing to think of.
Yeah.
You know? And how that's baked into the way that it's going to swing and push the narrative in different directions, having that higher risk of failure, or if not failure, then unexpected things happening to your story, which, as you say, is part of the fun of the game.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the great thing too, is because I had a similar realization of, like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because you're rolling, 1 to 10 twice. So if you get 6, like, that's like a better than, 50% chance of at least one of those dice coming up below that 6, which also means, like, you just need to get 2 boxes of progress, and there's a chance. There's a chance you could get a hit, weak hit or a strong hit. It's not a great chance, but there's a chance. And sometimes that is more fun when you're like, well, I've only got 3 boxes of progress. but it really feels like things are wrapping up.
Mm.
I think I have to roll on this to see what happens.
Yep.
And, and much like the advice to, only do the things that are interesting to you, as a solo player, like, you're the one who decides what the consequences are. And, the move says on a miss, like, you either have to re-swear your iron vow and,
Right.
raise the rank, or you have to forsake the vow. Well, you can narratively frame that in a whole bunch of different ways. And that could even be that you get what you want, but what you want isn't actually the thing that you needed.
Mm.
And, it still has that narrative like push forward, but you are suddenly realizing like, oh, I thought that what I needed to get was this power cell to charge the generator on the space station, but actually this power cell will overload the generator unless I have this inverter, and that inverter is on the other side of the star system. So now I have to, re-swear my vow to go find that inverter, and it's a lot harder than getting this power cell.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you don't have to, like, don't think about it as, oh, a miss is a failure and therefore, like,
Stop.
I'm playing badly,
Yeah.
It's like, sometimes misses are the most interesting results for a roll. Sometimes you get to 10 boxes of progress and you're like, all right, I'm going to fulfill this vow and it's going to be great. And then you roll those two tens.
It's just a formality.
Just like, I guess I'm starting over from scratch.
Yeah. Actually, just as you talk about this, I think I've had another realization about it, that talking about leaning into the things that are more important to you, if you're struggling to fill out a track, maybe it's not that interesting to you. And maybe you should just roll on it now. Or like maybe, and I had that experience as well. I'm like, okay, so we've got to get through this belt of asteroids or whatever. I'm like, well, okay, we're through now, but there's only 4. Like, does that mean that it keeps going? And I was sort of still getting used to the mechanics and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I guess if you can't think of what else should be going on, maybe you should just roll on it and you try and complete it and fail, and then see where that takes the story. And why did it fail? What did you, the character, misunderstand about the situation? Like that means that this is a failure now, or that it's a miss or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where, that's one of the reasons why I enjoy Starforged so much, is because the results are so broad that, because I do feel as though I have that strongly developed sense of narrative, that I can mold those results to fit the story that I'm trying to tell, while also kind of keeping it true to the mechanics themselves of like, well, it's a miss, so there's going to be a complication, something big has to happen, but I can still fail forward, or whatever that complication is going to support the narrative that I'm trying to tell. Or, and occasionally this does happen, something will, and this is why I love playing these games and why I don't just go write a novel, because I could do that. I have done, but I want that little bit of uncertainty where sometimes you get into a situation where you're like, I think this is where we're headed. And then the dice go completely the opposite direction. And as the storyteller, I'm just like, okay, yeah, I can see an interesting path going this direction.
Right.
So let's follow it.
But only because you were forced to smash some neurons together to try and figure out what the hell is going on. And that is the unique magic, or one of the unique magics about this hobby, and the thing that I love. And starting out saying, this is what's going to happen, this is my story. Oh, shit. Give me 2 words and, wow, well, maybe it was the other guy,
Yep.
It's so exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think another point with Ironsworn, and we're just into the advice giving portion of playing Ironsworn now. I think it's in the original Ironsworn book, but Sean talks about like actually trying to plan out your beats for a vow. And I think like that's a really good idea because it gets into those situations where you're like, okay, well, I've got 4 boxes of progress and I've made it through the asteroid belt. Well, if you were like, okay, well, I need to think about this. It's a dangerous vow. So that's 2 boxes for every, progress that I make. So I'm looking for like 3 to 5 sort of major beats to this vow. So, okay, well, what are the challenges that I could overcome? Well, all right, so we've got to arrive at the asteroid belt, and we've got to, do some scans to see if there's a good path through. Okay, that's one. The second one is like, all right, well, we're making our way through the asteroid belts, and there's got to be some sort of obstacle. Okay, well, maybe I decide what that is right now. Maybe I save it for an oracle roll because maybe that first roll will provide some illumination. So you're creating almost like an outline for what the steps are to fulfill the vow. And that's not prescriptive. That doesn't say like, okay, well, this is how it has to go, but it gives you a framework to work towards. And then as your dice rolls introduce new complications, you can be like, oh, well, I'm just going to discard, this part of the quote unquote outline. I'm going to throw that away because this is a much more interesting thing. But it at least gives you some like, oh, these are steps that I should take to fulfill this vow. And it fits within the difficulty rank of this vow so that I have a sense of like, all right, well, I'll get close to fulfilling the vow when I get to this many steps taken because it's going to fill that track. And sometimes the dice rolls will lead to you getting there sooner than you expected, and that's totally okay.
Yeah.
But having that little bit of a
something to hold on to, right?
Yeah.
That is fantastic advice. Is that in the Starforged book as well, as much as Ironsworn, or not so?
I don't remember. It has been a long time, and I'm not even sure if that might just be kind of received knowledge from being in the Ironsworn Discord and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure it's in the original Ironsworn book, and it might be in Starforged as well. But I have not. I have not gone back and actually read the like how to play section in a while. Yeah.
And this is fantastic advice, and it fits so perfectly in. And I can see now, like things are becoming clearer in my mind with some of the issues I faced, and I can see now as well that is possibly one of the reasons why your ship has this drive that has to recharge constantly and can never go very far, right? Because even at a minimum, you could be like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen in the asteroid belt, but it's going to take me, I'm going to have to stop 3 times to charge, and even if you're only stopping and then rolling and saying, is there a random encounter or does something happen here? Mm-hmm. Even if nothing happens, you've still created 3 stops and 3 opportunities to mark progress and 3 sections of that story, of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, fantastic advice, everyone. Write that down. Incorporate it into your games immediately. I know I will. We are getting up toward the end of the show, and I know you have a con to go to today.
I do.
Which is very exciting. Give us a quick outline about what you're going to do at the con.
Yeah, so it is our local Comic-Con, and it's been going on for 10 years, I want to say, plus or minus a few years. And I have tried to go every year, but for the last 7 or so years, I have been working in a job that I have to work all weekend because it is a holiday weekend here in the US, and my job kind of required me to work holidays and all that good stuff. But I've transitioned into a new job, so I have the day off today. I can go spend the whole day at the con, and I've got some friends who are going as well. So I think we're gonna meet up and walk around. It's really cool because there's a bunch of local artists and Michigan, which is the state that I'm in, artists who are here, and I've gotten the opportunity to get to know some of them over the years of just kind of visiting their booths throughout the different cons. And I guess I should clarify. I get to go to the con in the past for about an hour, and then I have to leave to go to work.
Okay.
So I've been able to go to the con, but
Yeah.
it has been like I stop in, I hit all the booths. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Hey, this is really cool, and then I have to leave.
Yeah.
Whereas today I can kind of luxuriate in it. But it's really cool. It's one of the artists' favorite con in the state because it's a little bit more low key, a little bit smaller. They have a little bit more opportunity to just kind of chat with fans, and it's really cool. And there's a small gaming room, so I'll probably drop in there and see if there's anything interesting going on. Say hi to a couple friends, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's been a while. I'm going to take some business cards and see if I can muster up the courage to talk to people if they seem interested in gaming about my little podcast.
And speaking of your I wouldn't say your little podcast, your epic adventure podcast, what's coming up on Errant Adventures? What's happening on the show?
Yeah, so it is a weird situation in podcasting where you're talking about that you're still in the first season, and I'm just like, I feel like that was my worst season, because your first episodes and everything are almost always the worst, and that doesn't mean they're bad quality, but like it just means that you get better as you do something longer. And there are times where I'm like, should I just like archive all of the first like 3 seasons and have people start with what I'm doing right now, which is a long running game of Traveler, the granddaddy of all sci-fi RPGs. I reached a point when I was wrapping up my 3rd season where I was like, do I continue doing Starforged, which I'm absolutely happy with, or do I try something else? And I was like, well, I've always wanted to play Traveler, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to convince my gaming group to try it out. And so I was like, well, I could do this story that I'm thinking in Starforged, or I could try it in Traveler. And I created a couple characters using the Traveler character creation rules, which is, I think, probably the best part of Traveler. I don't know if you're familiar with Traveler at all, but
No.
it is okay. So it's a life path system, and so you create your character through a bunch of random dice rolls. You start at 18. You pick if they go into the military, or if they go to college, or if they just go right into a career. And there are career terms of 4 years where there are like random events, and you get skills and all this stuff. And
Cool.
it is so
what
much
a great
fun.
idea.
Like, one of my characters, I rolled for her to go into the Naval Academy. She got in. She graduated with honors. I was like, this is awesome. First term in the Navy, I failed. So they have a survival roll, which basically just means, do you make it through the 4-year term in this career, and like stay in that career. It doesn't necessarily mean like life or death survival, although it can. It can. There's the opportunity to die in character creation, very famously in classic Traveler. And so she went from being this like honors student who graduated, and part of the like graduation role that I made, she automatically got like commissioned in the Navy. And so it was just like she was on a rising star path. And then I failed the survival roll and had to roll a like random event to see what happened. And she was a pilot, and she basically like led her squadron through like a hazardous area, and like they all died except for her. And she got like cashiered out of the Navy. And here I am like essentially playing through this as I'm like rolling these dice and writing down notes and stuff. And I'm like, well, shit, what does she do now? Like, well, she's going to get recruited into the scout service. And so I roll on that. She succeeds on her roll to get into the scout service. So now she's a scout pilot instead of a Navy pilot.
But still with the guilt.
Still with the guilt. And then like her next situation, she survives the path, the career like term, but gets a random event where she has to like go to the aid of a ship that is in danger. And oftentimes with these, you have to make rolls, and you're making rolls off of like skills and stuff that you do not have yet. And so I had to make like a medicine roll or something like that, which she does not have. And I failed the roll, and the result was like all of these people die or something. And I'm just like, but she stays in the. So I'm like, so now she's got this double guilt of like, all right, well, I did something foolhardy and I got my wing killed. I'm now a scout and I try to do this good thing to help these people, and they all die.
Man.
Yeah, and it just like goes on from the. And I'm like, I got to the end of it, and I was like, this character is now fully fleshed in my brain.
What a fantastic concept!
Yeah,
forced character depth.
Yeah. So, and it's great too, because you don't come to the table with any backstory. Like, you're not creating a character like you are in, D&D or something like that, where you're like, okay, well, here's my backstory. I'm going to pick, first level fighter. It's like, no, you are playing as a lived in character. Like, this character is, because you have 4-year terms and you select when you want to stop. But at a certain point, you start having to roll on like aging. So you start taking penalties for aging and stuff like that. So, I think she got out at like 38. So I'm like, this is not some like fresh faced kid. Like, this is somebody who has been through life and has a lot of stories to tell about what their life was like. So yeah, that was what kind of drew me into Traveler. And then it's a super simple like 2d6 plus stat plus skill system, which is nice because there's a lot of like subsystems with Traveler that you can add on so you can get a lot of depth. But ultimately, if you want, you can just roll 2d6 and add the skills and the stats. And that's really all you need to kind of make the game run, which is great for me, because I prefer stuff that is simpler and is able to be streamlined. But every once in a while, I want to dig into a little bit of depth. I want to get a little crunchy with it because I think it makes the story even more interesting when you see, that I'm not putting my hand on the tiller and guiding the ship as intensely as you might think. I'm actually letting the dice decide some of these things. So I'm about I don't even want to say halfway through. I'm almost through part 2 of book 1. And this is something that I'm planning to be a longer term thing, because what I kept running into with my Starforged games is I have a sci-fi universe that I have been writing stories in for 12 years now. And I really want to focus on that. And I want to release some of the novellas and short stories and stuff that I've written in that universe. And with the Starforged campaigns, I was basically using the Starforged rules and setting truth systems to build a universe specifically for that Starforged campaign. And I kept running into these situations where I'm like, well, I have this idea for something, but I want to hold on to that to use it for the real story.
Yeah.
And I never had the time, because I was devoting all my time to creating the podcast, to actually devote to writing those stories and creating in that universe that I was holding on to these ideas for. So I reached a point where I was like, all right, I need to do something different with the show and kind of bring these ideas together. So that's where, in a sense, I've rebooted the podcast, even though I say this is like season 4. It is essentially a good onboarding point to the podcast. One, because I feel like I have learned my methods. And so the show is pretty good at this point. But also it is the story that I want to tell going forward.
Yeah. So you can jump in on season 4 if you want to, but I go back to the beginning, because I know, like what you say, and everyone has that experience, right? Because you have grown as a podcast creator, and so you can see your progress. But one of the fantastic things about this medium, I find and have always thought, is that it stays there and is just as relevant, And so when I come in and discover you at season 1, I haven't been through your growth progress. So to me, it is still just as good as it was to you at the beginning. And then as a listener, then you get to go through and experience that growth yourself. So I say go back to the beginning. It's fantastic. I'm really enjoying it. Where can people find you and the Errant Adventures?
Yeah, so Errant Adventures is on all of the podcasts catchers and all of the places that you find podcasts. You can find me there. I'm also over on YouTube if that's your preference. I, for a short period of time, thought that I was going to do more kind of direct-to-camera YouTube videos, but turns out writing a script for that and doing the podcast and, having a full-time job and a marriage, something had to go on the back burner. So I've done fewer of those direct-to-camera videos, but I do post all the episodes on the YouTube. I have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, whatever, however you pronounce it, as well.
Never figured that one out.
I've never figured it out either. For people who want to find me, and all of those things are Errant Adventures. And then my website is errantadventurespod.com. And if you want to reach out to me, it's errantsolopod@gmail.com, because I did all of these things before I thought through the fact that I should try to make everything
always the
same.
way. It's so frustrating.
Yes. And then if you want to poke me on social media, I'm over on Blue Sky and Instagram, although I admittedly very much struggle with social media and do not post all that much over there. So I'm pretty responsive when people tag me, but I'm like every 3 weeks, I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably post something on this.
And in addition to that, by the time this episode comes out, we will have, it is now already been soft launched at the time of recording, but we will be fully rolling a project that you and I have been involved within together.
Yes.
With a whole bunch of other fantastic audio content creators out there, the Solo RolePlayers Podcast Network. This is a website that we've collaborated on to put together where we have the best, highest quality, most exciting solo RPG podcasts in the world, all in one space. And since we soft launched it the other day, I haven't talked about this in the group yet, but I've had people contact me saying, hey, you should check my stuff out. You know? And there's, of course, really great stuff out there that we didn't know. And so I know it's only going to grow. This means you can go to SoloRolePlayersNetwork.com and you can see a whole list of these fantastic creators all in one place. Most of us have trailers up there, something I'm still slow on getting up. But you can listen to a trailer, you can read through some of the stuff, and you can just sample an episode and find your new fantastic solo role-playing adventure.
Yeah, it is fantastic to be creating solo content, but not alone anymore.
Exactly.
Which is wonderful.
The paradox is finally coming full circle.
Indeed.
Thank you, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure. One more thing, and I'm gonna what's the expression? Throw you in the cold water?
Ooh,
Spotlight?
right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Put you on the spot. That's what I'm gonna do.
There it is.
I'm gonna put you on the spot here and invite you to ask if you would, shortly after this episode airs, would you be interested in coming into our Celebrity Lounge over in Discord and being there for 24 hours where people get to ask you questions about your stuff? And then we'll kick you out again at the end of the party.
I would love to. That would be a lot of fun.
Fantastic.
It won't be a celebrity lounge though. It'll just be a lounge. We're all just people, just hanging out.
We're all just people, but you'll be the celebrity in this case. It is. We had our first one with Tana Pigeon, and she established that the Celebrity Lounge should be a bathrobe, brandy and cigar type affair.
Sounds great.
Even if you don't feel like a celebrity, the bathrobes and cigars will help.
Absolutely.
Like one. Thank you, Steve. Been an absolute pleasure. I really look forward to continue listening to your show and catching up again in the future.
Thanks for having me on.
No worries. Cheers.
Cheers.